Bridging the Gap by Brenda Smith. Chapter 10, Graphic Illustrations. In this chapter, you will answer the following questions. What do graphics do? What is a diagram? What does a table do? What is most helpful on a typical map? What does a pie graph represent? How do you read a bar graph? What is a line graph? And what information does a flow chart convey? What do graphics do? In sum, graphics condense information, clarify information, and convince the reader of something. So it is a big picture of the material. It's not detailed, it is a snapshot. How to read graphic material. Remember, a graphic, like a picture, speaks 1,000 words. So make sure you read the title to get an overview of what the graphic is trying to represent based on the material you're reading. Look for footnotes and read introductory material so you have a summary of what's going on. Otherwise, you're making a guess on what that graphic means. Read the labels. This indicates what you're supposed to be looking at, either on the left or the bottom of that graphic. Notice the trends and find the extremes. If you have a pie chart or a graph and there is extremes, then you know they're trying to convey a certain message to you. And then you're going to draw the conclusion and formulate future exam questions from that graph. Remember, it is to clarify, it is to condense, but it's also conveying and convincing you of information that is based in that material. It's a summary of that information, and you need to be able to draw a conclusion and make an educated guess before you move on. Five kinds of graphic illustrations. These are the illustrations we'll be going over in this chapter. There are diagrams, there are tables, there are maps, there are graphs, and there are flowcharts, all of them representing a different way to convey and convince you of information. Diagrams. Diagrams are the easiest graphic illustration to figure out because they are pictures. They're usually an outline drawing or a picture of an object or a process. In this picture, you'll see a tooth. So probably the material is about dentistry or teeth, and that gives you a visual representation of the material. Tables. Tables are not as exciting as diagrams, which have picture and color, but they are very useful. A table is a listing of facts and figures in columns and rows for quick and easy reference. So you will see this a lot in like telephone books and directories. How to read a table. A table can be a little bit confusing because it looks like a mass of numbers, information, or titles. So first thing is, read the title for the topic. Make sure you know what the table represents. Then read the footnotes to judge the source. Make sure at the bottom it tells you what exactly the table is meant to do or what it's representing. Then determine what each column represents and how they interact. You'll probably have information on the side, information on the bottom, and maybe information on the top. And you want to make sure that you're cross-referencing accordingly. Typically, you go from left to right and you go from up to down, but possibly the footnotes will tell you something different. You'll see on the graphs I have there, it tells you that there's information that's going up and increasing and information that's going down, decreasing based on those graphs. Maps. What do traditional maps do? A traditional map is like a Thomas guide that you would keep in your car. It shows the location of cities, waterways, sites, and roads, and is typically color coordinated so you know what is what. It shows the difference in the physical terrain of specified areas, if it's mountainous, if it's water, or if it's the desert. A modern map highlights special characteristics of population distribution of a particular area, so it gives you a better idea if it's a city, or if it's a suburb, or if it's out in the middle of nowhere and there's hardly anybody there. So a map details all of that, particularly with a legend, which is a little cheat sheet on the side of that page that lets you know what colors coordinate with what items, like a freeway or a toll road, or if it's a population statistic. How do you read a map? Note the title, source, and date. Make sure to study the legend, which is the little cheat sheet that shows you the symbols, shadings, colors, and meanings of what the information on the map is. Pie graphs. Pie graphs often represent information to you in a circle, like a pie or a pizza, and this may throw you back to elementary or junior high when you're learning fractions and math. It is a quick visual representation on how information or statistics is divided up. A pie graph is a circle that is divided into wedge-shaped slices, usually color coordinated with a statistic. The complete pie or circle represents 100% of whatever you happen to be talking about. Each slice is a percent or a fraction of that 100% whole. So it's a quick representation. You see this a lot in politics, and it's a great graph to use on TV or in marketing or in a presentation you're giving to a class. Bar graphs. What is a bar graph? A bar graph is usually a series of horizontal or vertical bars in which the length of each bar represents a specific or particular amount or percentage or fraction. So it's very similar in nature to a pie graph, but it shows you in columns a series of different items which can be quickly compared by noting the different bar graphs. So if it's up, it means it's higher, and if it's low, it means that it's a decreased population or percentage of the whole of what you're talking about. A line graph. What is a line graph? Well, it's a continuous curve or frequency distribution in which numbers are plotted in an unbroken line. You see this a lot with the stock market. The horizontal scale measures one aspect of the data, and the vertical line measures the other aspect. So it tells you what's going up and what's going down based on statistics that's on the side of the page and usually on the bottom of the page. As the data fluctuates, the line will change direction and it will become very jagged. And this could be plus or this could be minus. Good news or bad news, depending on what you're tracking. Flowcharts, the final in the 5. A flowchart shows the sequence of a set of elements and the relationships among them. So it's very visual. It's not very detailed, but it's a great representation of information on how one thing flows to something else. So you see this a lot in human resources, how to fill out an application, what steps to take, what classes to take at a university or college. Key ideas are stated in boxes, and supporting ideas are linked by arrows. We also talked about a flow chart, which is called mapping, and that was in a different chapter. So they look very similar in nature. One thing leads to something else, and it's usually in sequence. Summary points. What did you learn in this chapter? What do graphics do? Well, they convey, they convince, and they also clarify information that was in the chapter. What is a diagram? Remember, it's like a picture. What does a table do? It helps you cross-reference information, usually from up to down or from left to right. What is most helpful on a typical map? Typically, it tells you where you are, where you're going. So obviously, the colors really help you, and the legend really helps you figure out what's a road, what's a toll road, what's a freeway, what's a city, what's a suburb. What does a pie graph represent? Remember, a pie represents 100%, and then there are fractions or pieces that represent the whole of that 100%. So it's a visual representation of statistics. How do you read a bar graph? A bar graph is similar to a pie graph, where it is parts of a whole or 100%, and it shows you columns to represent those statistics. What is a line graph? Usually in the stock market, it shows you what's going up and what's going down. There's information on the side and on the bottom of that graph to let you know years, statistics, and percentages, so the graph makes sense. What information does a flowchart convey? Well, a flowchart simply is a mapping of information of sequence. What do you do first, second, and third? And how do you get from one thing to the next? So you see this a lot in human resources, on how to fill out an application, on what to do first, second, and third, or what class you should take before something else in sequence, like at a university or a college. So it's a visual representation on sequence. Search the net. Bridging the Gap has more activities for you than just what's in the textbook. For suggested websites and other research activities, go to www.ablongman.com/Smith. Then you will see other activities that you can engage in that will help you with your college success.